Celeste is an absolute masterpiece that sheds light on mental health struggles in a beautiful way. It all dates back to 2018 with the release of Madmake Games' magnum opus. Maddie Thorson and their small team of talented programmers gave life to this platforming gem, a gem that shines so bright it rightfully deserves the awards they won. Celeste itself is a painstakingly hard game, but even through all of its difficulty, you can expect to find beauty in everything about it. The enticing gameplay, the brilliant soundtrack, the gorgeous pixel art style, and the level design. These core aspects merge together to offer an unforgettable experience that teaches us an important lesson about how our minds work. You experience the game through the eyes of Madeline, a young girl who is determined to climb the heights of the mountain Celeste, no matter how perilous the road ahead will be for her. Despite her whimsical encounters, her depiction as a character is realistic, in the sense that she goes through what we all go through, mental health. As the game gets progressively harder, so does her struggle of living with anxiety. The mountain, so to speak, is a metaphorical representation of Madeline's mental health. At the bottom is where it's safe and stable, but the steep incline symbolizes her trying to cope with anxiety. It's a tough battle. Finally, the peak of Celeste demonstrates Madeline coming to terms with her inner demons, quite literally in fact, as she makes her way back down the mountain with a pleasant state of mind. Essentially, her climb to the top is a road to recovery. The story of Celeste is divided into 8 chapters, each one accompanied by a different level with a unique gameplay mechanic. I'll get onto those mechanics in a bit. Each chapter represents the next part of the mountain she has to climb. These levels have multiple screens, where you need to get from one side of the screen to another. The individual screens have a different layout of obstacles every time, so you have to think of a new strategy to overcome the tricky push to the goal. Celeste thrives in its gameplay. The fluidity of movement is essential in a platformer, especially one such as this which requires precise timing and accuracy. The character you play as bears various movement options which are improved in tandem with Madeline's mental health. You have the fundamentals of a platformer: running, jumping, and wall jumping. Celeste integrates 2 other gameplay mechanics that the player needs to utilize strategically to complete a screen. These mechanics are climbing and dashing. Let's say you try to jump onto a platform, but you can't reach it just by jumping, and you land on its side. You can climb up that platform and get to its surface. This is integral in tackling hard levels, dashing even more so. You can dash in 8 directions, which gives you the freedom of movement, but it can only be used once or twice before putting you into freefall. Most obstacles that you have to get past require a precise use of dashing. Notice how I said precise? Yeah, this term applies to pretty much all of Celeste, gameplay wise. Each screen is meant to be difficult, just like climbing an actual mountain. You will die a lot, no matter how good you are at the game. But there's no shame in dying, and the game doesn't punish you for failing. Rather, it encourages failure. Dying is part of a learning process to gradually get through to the end of a level. If you've died a lot, it just means that you've tried many times to beat that roadblock in your path to success, your climb to the top. Your death count is hard evidence that you are persistent. The game reminds you of that in the chapter selection, where it lists how many times you've died on a level. One shouldn't feel embarrassed by how many deaths they've accumulated, but proud instead. Proud that this is how many times you have died in order to reach the end. Proud that no matter how absolutely difficult the game may be, you eventually found the light at the end of the tunnel. It's the journey, not the destination, that molds you into a better player. One who has experienced how not to complete a level hundreds of times over. This journey up the mountain also molds Madeline into a better person for herself. Let's talk about Madeline a bit more for a minute. Her drive to surpass a challenge like this is unprecedented. She's got determination of steel. However, what holds her back is the negative thoughts on her mind. Hence she feels conflicted throughout various parts of the game. The people she meets try to bring her down by insulting her bravery, but she pulls through and bounces back up. She endures several mental hardships throughout the game, some of which include: in Chapter 1, Madeline continues her dangerous journey to the top of the mountain, insisting that she wants to climb it. Before she stops for the night and sleeps, she ponders whether venturing up Celeste was a mistake. In Chapter 2, after escaping an intense chase with the negative part of herself in physical form, she tries to reach out to the world beyond Celeste and discuss her terrifying experience. The boy she talks to on the payphone insists that Madeline is fabricating what she just went through, which she denies. Even though this scene is just a dream, the dream itself is a materialization of Madeline's confusion with the path she confronts. These vague feelings build up over the course of her journey. In Chapter 4, The Golden Ridge, she reaches a gondola that is meant to take her up to the next part of Celeste. It suddenly malfunctions, causing Madeline to have a panic attack. We've established that the main character suffers from anxiety, something that's common in all of us really. It's the body's natural response to stress, which can be seen in this chapter where Madeline is put in a stressful situation with the gondola coming to a halt. Anxiety stems from the apprehension of what's to come. In this case, she fears dying either by staying there forever or the gondola dropping from the rail. These bad emotions are embodied by the literal part of Madeline, generally referred to as Madeline, who we are introduced to in Chapter 2. Madeline attempts to repress these emotions by running away from Madeline, and in turn running away from her self-doubt, but it always follows her. Madeline's presence is most significant in Chapter 6. This chapter is a turning point in the narrative and the development of Madeline's character arc, a powerful storytelling moment. Following her ventures at the Mirror Temple, Madeline and Theo find themselves at a campfire. They pause their journey to rest and reflect on the events that occurred in the previous chapter. Knowing that both can trust and rely on each other, Madeline becomes more transparent about her life and motivation to climb Celeste. She tells him that part of her broke free from a mirror, terrorizing her as a physical reminder of her struggles. Madeline represents all the things our little climber is not proud of, and believes the mountain has given those aspects an opportunity to materialize. After all they've been through together, Madeline thanks Theo for supporting her during her darkest times. Theo affirms to his mountain companion that she reminds him of his sister, a person that also seeks to self-impose a challenge to overcome the struggles Madeline deals with. These struggles are depression and anxiety, which she tries to keep to herself and normally does not want to talk about them. No one except her mother is aware of the mental problems she faces. Up until this point, the entire game, the entire journey you've experienced from the eyes of Madeline, was always intended to be a challenge, hence the difficulty. To Madeline, climbing Celeste is her way of seeking to accomplish something magnificent in her life, regardless of how dangerous and stressful the journey is. You, as a player, feel that sense of accomplishment, overcoming a hard obstacle and finishing a chapter. The gratification of getting past a level after dying countless times? Madeline feels that too. Celeste wonderfully weaves the gameplay and Madeline's emotional journey together, drawing a strong parallel between the two. The heartfelt conversation comes to a close with a selfie, a means of remembering this eventful night before they sleep. As Madeline drifts away into her dreams, she comes to terms with the realization that she cannot run away from her problems, and inevitably has to confront them. By understanding that she can only avoid part of her for so long, she makes the decision to set Madeline free. A dilemma ensues. Madeline does not wish to be abandoned by the other part of her, and expresses her fury against Madeline by trapping her as punishment for Madeline trying to leave her when she only wanted to help. This altercation evokes another panic attack in Madeline. She attempts to use the feather technique taught by Theo, where she imagines trying to keep a feather afloat to control her breathing. Madeline, however, interrupts this by splitting the feather. That feather is the embodiment of the relationship between Madeline and part of her. In cutting the feather, the relationship is now severed. Madeline throws her good counterpart down to the ground. This broken bond is reflected in real life, where Madeline slips and falls off the edge into the bottom of the mountain. She's now alone, lost, beaten down by her own demons. But I guess, when you're at the bottom, the only way is up. Madeline's confidence and her ability to climb Celeste gradually dips, and she becomes infuriated at herself for almost reaching the summit, but being forced to restart from the beginning due to Madeline. The area she finds herself stuck in and the music that plays initially convey that feeling of hopelessness. You guide Madeline through some obstacles as she tries to find a way out of her predicament until she comes across the old woman, a character you meet earlier in the game. Initially, the old woman believes that Madeline's insistence on climbing the mountain has died out and thus has given up. Our protagonist goes on to explain that it was Madeline's fault for rendering her unable to get to the summit. In response, the old woman tells Madeline that she should talk things out with the other part of her, which leads her to pursue Madeline. You finally confront her again, watching as Madeline acknowledges Madeline's attempts to support her by apologizing for leaving her behind. However, part of her does not find her apologies to be truthful. Madeline's disbelief in the protagonist's attempts to appeal to her is a catalyst for one of the most intense moments in a platforming game, a boss fight. But not just any ordinary boss fight, it's a chase sequence, and more specifically, Madeline's internal conflict of emotions. Normally, the first rule in a game of the platforming genre is to not touch the enemy. In this skirmish between the good and bad of Madeline, touching the enemy is vital to ensuring victory. You deal damage whenever you come into contact with Madeline. Why? In this boss battle, you are quite literally the boss. The lingering fear in Madeline is a part of her, and it doesn't come from an external source like a horror movie villain. She knows that she cannot escape it anymore. Her problems are running away from her. The only option she has is to fight those demons. This is definitely one of my favourite moments in any game. In terms of the gameplay, you're constantly on the move and there's no time to waste. No time to think about how to plan out your next action. The only time you have is spent chasing after Madeline. The entire sequence perfectly captures the process of healing. The first step is confronting the problem. The atmosphere being portrayed here is gorgeously rich and immersive. The stakes are tumultuous, the platforming is intense, and your motive to overcome it all, a passionate one. It is no longer a matter of Madeline avoiding the issues she needs to confront, but the exact opposite. She wants to come to terms with everything about her she isn't proud of, though the solution isn't immediate. The chase sequence represents a gradual journey towards understanding your own mental health. A glitching effect occurs as you progress deeper in the fight, which can be interpreted as a visual example of the initial climb towards recovery. It's hazy, and undoubtedly difficult to begin overcoming the shadows that loom over you. Eventually, you will learn that it isn't about towering over those shadows, but standing beside them, working in conjunction with each other. That is Madeline's goal. She too will achieve it after pushing herself to reach out to the part of her that wants to escape. The more screens you complete, the more her words resonate with Madeline. That glitching effect I just mentioned can also represent her psyche healing. The glitching out becomes more noticeable in accordance with the barrier between Madeline and part of her breaking away. When it comes to mental health, the advice I know a lot of people would give me revolves around overcoming it, getting rid of it by thinking that it shouldn't be as big of an issue as I make it out to be, telling myself that I am better than the things that cause those mental illnesses to become a larger burden. Of course, it never is a one-glove-fits-all solution. Many people have various ways of dealing with their own mental health issues. Celeste teaches a valuable lesson about how to deal with such problems in a way that doesn't involve suppressing them. It encourages the mindset of being able to understand yourself and your mental illnesses. Yeah, you can get over it at some point, but you don't know when or if it's going to come back. Those mental illnesses exist alongside you. They are a part of you. Shoving it under the rug and pretending that it was never there in the first place can help. But for how long will it help? That's what Celeste inspires, a different way to cope with them, or rather, work with them. Like how Madeline and part of her work together to reach heights they couldn't have reached before. Recognize those mental illnesses, but don't allow them to invalidate you. Listen to yourself and your fears. After a series of grueling obstacle courses, the two comes to a halt. Madeline endeavours to comfort Madeline through affirming that working together is key to getting them out of that chasm. This enlightens her, and she begins to understand that it's okay to be afraid of the feeling of abandonment. she begins to understand that change can only happen if they cooperate. Thus, they merge into a single being, which grants Madeline a godsend of an ability, an additional dash. Honestly, this chapter is a beautiful blend of pretty much every aspect of gaming. The product is a culmination of gameplay, story, music, and atmosphere being intertwined, offering an experience that is sure to leave a long-lasting impression on you. Madeline and part of her now work in tandem to overcome a mutual challenge to reach the summit of Celeste. This is equally one of the best moments in gaming I've had the pleasure of experiencing, and one of the best final levels in my opinion. It excellently encapsulates your entire journey with the game, progressing through each individual section of the mountain again, one by one. This time, you have Madeline's support in the form of a second dash, which allows you to propel through obstacles usually out of reach. It allows the player to relive the levels and the mechanics specific to them, with a better understanding of how to get past said obstacles. Chapter 7 Summit essentially wraps up this beautiful indie gem by engulfing you in the memories of completing these levels firsthand, a reminder of your achievements and how much you've done to get this far. But you're not done yet. You've still got a mountain to climb, and the help of a former enemy to help you get up there. Alongside the level design, Lena Waine's music is significant here, which makes this masterpiece all the more impactful. The leitmotif of Celeste, the music that plays in the prologue, is echoed in the song, with the individual areas represented by the instrumentation. It gives off the essence of hopefulness and determination, encouraging you to achieve the ultimate goal you spent so long trying to accomplish. There's nothing stopping you now. One of the key components of this level is the final stretch to the summit. The game introduces physical checkpoints that exemplify the progress you've made. There is an undeniable satisfaction of reaching a new checkpoint with the knowledge that you are getting closer. You're constantly hooked in to finish what you've started. It's almost impossible to bear the temptation of putting the game down when you're this close to reaching the end. While the summit may be one of the hardest challenges in Celeste, the difficulty is countered by your drive to overcome it. It's the curtain call, and you are responsible for drawing the curtains. Earlier on, I mentioned that the summit represented Madeline finally coming to terms with her inner demons. She did it. You did it. A challenge once thought impossible by her has just been completed. The reward? A breathtaking glance of a sunset crowning the lands beyond. Savor that sight, for it is the fruit of your labor. The credits roll. We see Madeline and part of her make their way back down the mountain without any urgency, spending some time having fun as they go. They travel together, having found common ground. Madeline acknowledges her insecurities, and those insecurities understand that they need to be there for her to support one another. One of Madeline's first lines is, "Let's go home together." Having finished her mission, Madeline intends to do just that. Together. Celeste is both a platforming masterpiece and a poignant message to its players about mental health. It executes those themes brilliantly by fusing gameplay, music, visuals, and narrative, creating a remarkable adventure that no fan of games should miss out on. Its existence is founded upon the moral that it isn't about the destination. It was always about the journey.